Hi class, Jolene here. So today we're going to learn how to create a collage in Photoshop made up of several different images. And we're going to do it in the surrealism style or a fantasy style. So you can see here, this is my finished product, and this is what I'm going to show you how to create. This is made up of multiple layers. We'll take a look at my layers, starting with the background image. I'll turn off all the other layers so you can see this. So kind of have a deep space image. All these images are ones that I found on the internet. And then I added a road, which I cut out or selected from another image, and I'm going to be showing you how to do that. Then I added a car. And then this funny guy, this marshmallow type alien, and then a dog as the passenger. So that's my final. So I've got a background and then 4 more pieces on top of it. So let's take a look at the images I started with and how I created it. So I've got all my images open here. Here's my original image. And the thing you want to take notice of as you're collecting the images is to make sure that they're large enough to begin with, that they have enough pixels to begin with, because your final product is going to be, or your final image is going to be 9 inches by 7 inches or 7 by 9, depending on whether you want to do a horizontal or vertical image, and at 200 dpi. So let's take a look at this first image, see what size it is. Image and image size. It's 19 inches by 12 at 100. So if I changed that resolution to 200, the inches would still be large enough to accommodate what we're doing. I'll show you how that works. So if I go back to image and image size, and then I uncheck resample here, and then change this resolution to 200, you can see this will come out to 9.6 by 6 inches, which is just a little bit shy of what we need, but it will still definitely work. So you just need to be close to that. All right, so then my next image is a road. Again, something I found from the internet. Take a look at this one. Yep, this one's huge. It's 32 inches by 74. If I change that resolution to 200, it's still almost 12 by 9 inches, way bigger than what I need. So that's the same for all of these. I made sure that all of these images were bigger or right at the size that I'm eventually going to need. And if you're only cutting out a part of it, like I will be with this, and this is going to be really small, then you don't need quite as many pixels, but you should still be striving for finding the largest pixels possible. All right, so we're going to start off with creating our artboard. So we're going to go to File and New. And we're going to use this custom size, and I already had that typed in, but we want it to be 9 inches by 7. We want in my case, I want the orientation to be horizontal and a resolution of 200, and you can make this RGB color. And then I'll say create. And so there it is. And if I go to image and image size, we can verify that it's 9 by 7 at 200. So when I open your file, your Photoshop file that you submit, that's the first thing I'm going to look at to make sure that you set all these specs up exactly as requested. So now we've just got a white background. We can leave that the way it is. And now I'm going to go over to what I want to use for my background image. And there's a couple of ways you can do this, but the easiest way is to just, well, first of all, you need to unlock that background image so that it's movable. And now I'm just going to click and drag it up to this, which is going to be my artboard that I'm going to be working on. And then I'll resize that. So if I do Control or Command D, I can just size that up so it looks just about like that. And then I'll click the check mark, and then that sets it into place. Now I want to make sure I save it what it's going to ultimately be. So I'll save it in the folder where I'm saving all my other stuff, and I'll name this Space Travelers. I already had one named Space Travelers, so I'll just make this Space Travelers 2. But you should name it the way you're going to name it. Let me just show you that. So I'll go back to Save As, and so if I was the student, I'd be naming this Jolene.Crowley number 5 Surreal Final, and then I'll make sure that it's going to be, I'll select this Save As type and make sure that it is a native Photoshop file which maintains the layers, and then click Save. Okay, so you can see it saved properly there. Okay, so there's my first layer, and I'm going to name this background so we can keep track of things. And so I'm finished with that one now. I can close that image, and I don't need to save it. And the next image I want to use is the one with the road. So I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool, which is right here below the lasso tool. And it makes straight lines. So that's what I need for this one. So I'm going to start right here, click once, and then put my cursor up here, click, 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 and then I will end here. See that little circle that's now next to the polygonal icon? That's telling me that I'm closing the path. So now I've got the marching ants, and that's telling me that what is selected. So you can see it's not perfect. I went because I was making straight lines with the polygonal tool, and this is not perfectly straight. I don't have a perfect selection, not yet at least, but I will. So I'm going to switch over to my move tool here. I'm going to select and move that into where my base image is. I'm going to get it lined up approximately where I want it, and I'll set that into place and then rename this layer Road. Now I'm going to go and clean this up because I've got edges that are not quite right, and that makes it look fake. So we want to make this look as real as possible, even though it's surreal for the style. So I'm going to grab the eraser tool, which is right here, and I want to make sure that I have a nice clean line. So I'm going to go up here and make sure that the hardness is all the way up to 100%. And right now the size of the brush looks pretty good to me. I'm going to start working with that and see how it works. And I need to make sure I'm on this layer, because if I'm on this layer, watch what happens. Now I'm erasing the background layer. I'm going to do Command Z and then make sure I'm on this layer, because this is the layer that I want to erase. So I'm going to come up here and just start carefully going down this line. I'm holding down the mouse. I might need to go back and do it another time to just make sure I get a really clean line over here. I'm holding down right now the space bar and then moving my image to get to the next part of it. I might make this brush a little bit smaller. And the way to do that is to either go here and make it smaller, or I can use the brackets on my keyboard, and the left bracket will make it smaller. The right bracket makes it larger. So I'm just going to come along and clean that up. Notice that I'm doing it kind of in small pieces. I'm clicking and dragging across it and then letting go and starting over. If you try to do it all in one fell swoop and something goes wrong, like this, watch. and it ate up too much. Now I've got to redo that whole thing. I'm going to do Command Z and go back and do it in smaller portions. You really have to have patience with this part of it. But the patience and getting it as precise as possible is what makes it look real. I want to go back and clean that up a little bit more and then move over to this side and clean this side up. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger by using the right bracket. And another way I could do this at this point is to switch back to that polygonal tool. Let's try that. It's right here. So I'll click right here and here and here. Come up. I don't need to be precise at this point, and close it there. So I've selected more than I need, and that's fine in this case. Now I'm just going to click the delete key and bam, it's gone. Now just to stop the marching ants, because I don't need them anymore, Control or Command D, the letter D as in dog. Now if I want to or need to, I can still resize this, move it around, make it bigger or smaller. I could also make a layer adjustment here to make this road darker. So again, I've got the road selected. I'm going to click down here on the adjustment layers, and I'll choose brightness and contrast, and maybe make the contrast a little bit more. See how that's making the road darker? I like that. So I'll leave it that way. Now switch back to my layers. Notice that I have now an adjustment layer here, and it has affected everything below it. Watch what happens when I turn this layer off, how it affects both the road layer and the background layer. I'm going to turn it off, and now you can see both of them are dull again. And so it has affected both of them. If I only want it to affect the road, but not the next layer below it, which is the background, if I hover between two layers and hold down the Alt key and then click, see how it made that little arrow? It has now hooked the brightness and contrast adjustment layer to only the layer below it, not the background layer also. To undo that, do the same thing, hold down Alt and click, and now it's undone. I like both of them being affected by it. I like the darker on both of them, so I'm going to leave that the way it is. All right, so now I've got my road selected. I'm going to switch over to the Volkswagen Beetle. And you'll notice here I've already made a second a duplicate layer. I'm going to delete that so you can see this is the way we started. I'm going to click on Control or Command J to make another layer so that just in case I mess something up, I've got another one right below it. Make sure you turn that layer off, the background layer off, so you can see what you're doing. This time I'm going to choose the Quick Selection tool to select the Volkswagen. So this one's a little bit different. You kind of click and drag and it just starts grabbing pixels. And you move along. The more contrast there is between what you're trying to select and what's beyond it, like this background layer, the more contrast there is, the better selection you'll get. So you can see what just happened here is all of this got selected too, and I don't want that. But that's okay for now. I'm going to show you how to fix that. And I'm going to go along and refine my selection. So now I'm inside of my selection, and I'm just using my mouse. I'm holding it down, and I'm just pushing these pixels out just a little bit at a time. You can select hardness and size for your brush here and make adjustments there if the pixels aren't, if it's not working the way you want it to, you can make adjustments there. So I'm just pushing these out carefully a little bit at a time. This is looking pretty good up here. Now you see I got too much there. So I'm going to switch over to the minus, and now see how my cursor has changed to a minus, and I'm going to subtract those pixels. Here again, I need to subtract these, but now I need to add this in, so I'll switch back to the plus and add these in. And again, I'm just doing a little bit at a time, and I'll just keep adding and subtracting. The shortcut for switching to toggling between the plus and the minus for adding and subtracting pixels is the Alt key. So watch what happens when I push down the Alt key. Now I have a minus, and I can go in and subtract. When I let go of it, it turns back to plus. I'm going to add a little bit more in right here. Oops, got too much. Subtract some of that. Add a little bit more here, and then I'll come down here and subtract this part. I'm subtracting these pixels from my selection. Add a little bit more there. Maybe just a little bit more over here. Too much. Hold down Alt and subtract that. Add a little bit here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. A little bit more right here. It's better to have too much because you can erase, as you saw on the last one. Now I'm going to go back to my move tool and add this. Hold on, going back to this, because notice what happened right here. I'm missing this piece of it, so I'm going to go back to this and add that part in. Had a little piece missing, so now I can drop this there. There we go. All right, now I'll name this layer car. And let's zoom in a little bit and see how we did here. So I can see that there's several things that need to be cleaned up here. So I'm going to grab my erase tool and just start cleaning this up a little bit. Again, I have a hard brush. You can see here it's nice and hard because I want a nice smooth edge. There will be times when you don't want it to be smooth and you can use a softer brush. Took off too much there. I have my hand hovering over my keyboard so that I can easily use the keyboard shortcut of Command or Control Z. And I'm just moving around here, checking all my edges. Notice I didn't use all of the car. Actually, I'm going to make this smaller. So let's go ahead and do that now. I want it to be really pretty small here. And I don't necessarily even need the tires to show because I want to make it look like it's zooming right off the edge. Now I'll zoom back in here and check my other edges. I'm going to switch back to my, let me cancel that, to apply the transformation, yes, to my erase tool. Kind of smooth that out a little bit. Sorry about that. I forgot to turn off the volume on my cell phone. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And I thought there was something to erase right there, but that's on the road, so that can stay there. Unless, of course, you don't want it there, then you can go to the road and use something, the road layer, and use something like the clone tool. I'll clone right here, and I could remove that if I wanted to. All right, now I'm going to go back to the car And there's one more thing I need to subtract, and that's this part of the background that was from the other image. So I'm going to get my quick select tool and select this part also. I'm going to make my brush smaller as I move over to this edge. Oops, too much, so I'm going to do Command Z. And that's looking pretty good. Too much again. It's because my brush is too big for this area, making it smaller again. And that might be as good as I can get with this selection tool. So I will delete that. And now we see the road behind it. Control or Command D to undo the marching ants. And now I'm going to go through and with the eraser tool and clean that up a little bit. Make my brush smaller. Again, I'm just doing small parts at a time in case I mess something up. And especially when you first start doing this, controlling the mouse is challenging. Or if you have a shaky hand, it can be challenging. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to save this now. Remember, I've already named it as a Photoshop file, so if I just do Command or Control Save, now it's saved. And you should do that fairly frequently because you don't want to lose all that work you just did. All right, so now I'm ready to add this guy in. This is going to be the driver. I'll unlock and make a copy of that. And now I'm going to get my selection tool again. And this one is easier because there's lots of contrast, at least on this side. When over on this side, it might start, it did pretty good there. I'm going to go down and grab just a piece of this. I don't need all of it, so there's no point in spending time selecting all of it if I don't need it. Let's go back to what it's going to look like. See, I only need a little piece of it. So that should be enough. And that looks like a pretty darn good selection. So I'm going to grab my selection tool again, drag it up here, and place it. And it's huge. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt to make it smaller. Shift keeps it in perspective, and Alt makes it smaller from the middle, which is nice. Now I will hover around the edge so I can just turn this, and I need it even smaller, probably about like that. Let's see how that looks in perspective. That looks pretty good, but you see this part's still too big, so I'm going to grab my eraser tool again after I apply that transformation. I'll make my eraser smaller. And then I want to erase it right here so that it looks like this is sitting right behind this steering wheel. And if it's not clear to me, we can lower the opacity on this layer so that I can clearly see the steering wheel behind it. And now I'll just erase that. I'm going to make this smaller. Let me make this opacity, put it back again, and something went wrong. What was it? I used the wrong tool. I used the spot healing tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my history and see how it's showing me everything I've done so far. I'm going to go back to right here in my history to master opacity change. Switch back to layers, make sure this time I'm using the eraser. And now I can erase that real easily. And now I'll turn the opacity back up, and now that's looking pretty good. All right, so the next thing I need is the dog. All right, the dog is going to be a little bit more of a challenge because it has fur. And so especially these areas right here are going to be more challenging. Remember, this is what I'm going for, and so I only need this top part of the dog. So I will make a copy of that layer, Command or Control J. Grab the, I'll use the magic wand again. Sorry, not magic wand. This is what happens when you use the magic wand. We want the quick select tool. So I'm going to do Control or Command D to deselect that. And now I'm on using the right tool. And I'll just select this part of it. Now, some decisions you need to make when you're doing this is, for one thing, we know we only need this part of it. And because the dog is going to be really small, just how much of the fur do I really need? I'm going to select a little bit more out like that and grab a little bit more of this ear. And then I will subtract this part. So I'm holding down the Alt key, and it's hard to see because my brush is so small. So let me make that bigger so you can see. Now I've got the minus, and I'm subtracting this part that I don't need. And I'll come around and deselect some of these pixels. And I might even just do this because I don't think we need that part of the fur. Grab a little bit more of this and about like that. And then the move tool, move this in to right here. Ooh, hello dog, very big. Again, I'm holding down Shift and Alt to make it smaller. Now I'm zooming in. And I didn't get enough of the dog here. So I'm going to delete that. First you have to set it, and then I'm just going to delete that layer. And I'm going to go back to this and grab more of this. So that's why you want to leave it open until you're absolutely sure. So I will get my select tool again and add some more of the dog in. Go back to the move tool. And now I need to resize it again. Zooming back in. And I want them sitting about like that. And that's looking pretty good. And so now I'm going to erase this part of him so that it looks like he's sitting behind the dashboard. So again, I will lower the opacity here on this layer, which is the dog layer. I'll rename that. And I see that I forgot to do this layer, which is Marshmallow Guy. Do that now. And then move back to the dog layer. And I'll zoom in on this so we can see it better. I'm going to use the erase tool. The shortcut for that is the letter E. And now I'm just going to come right along here where I can see that dashboard is. And I did it again. I used the wrong tool. This is the one I want. All right, so see what happened here? I took too much. So I'm going to do Command Z and erase that and fix that. Now let's back up and see how that's looking. That's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll take a little bit off right here. And now one thing I'm noticing is that the dog and the car are pretty dull. So I'm going to see what happens if I move this brightness layer up, and now it's affecting everything below it. And I think that that looks a lot better. So that's my finished product. I might go in and make a few more adjustments, make that the edges of the road a little smoother. I can see that this needs to be a little smoother. And those are the things I'm going to be grading you on. I'm going to be looking at how smooth your edges are and how well the transitions are and how each piece adds to kind of a little story. So, this is a story about two space travelers. Obviously, it's not real because it's meant to be surreal. So this is kind of what I'm looking for in the assignment that you create.